The quick question on the permanent residency. So once you got it, if you were to leave the UK, let's say for 5-6 years, going back to France, that's gone, or is it permanent residency for life, or is just as long as you stay a consistent resident?
Okay. Under European law as it stands, you lose permanent residency if you leave the UK for a continuous period of 2 years. So if you come back for a day, that's okay, but it's 2 years in a stretch. And you have to remember that once we leave the EU, obviously European law won't be enforced, so permanent residency is going to have to be covered under transitional arrangements, either converted into ILR or something similar. So indefinite leave to remain, sorry.
What are your options if you are living in this country for less than 5 years?
If you are a qualified person, we would recommend that you get a registration certificate. That shows that you are exercising treaty rights. It would be subject to negotiation between the UK and the EU as to what would happen to those individuals at the date that European law ceases to have effect in the UK.
My husband is British, I'm French, and we were thinking about retiring in France, which now I don't know what's going to happen, so it's a question about retirement. Just more than 2 years ago, we purchased a property in France, which we go there regularly, but obviously not for longer than 1 month maximum. We would like to know, it's actually for my husband's sake, because I took up British citizenship, what happens to him in France if there is a Brexit?
Okay. I mean, this goes to what we were talking about earlier, which is that will be part of the negotiations of the Article 50 negotiations. We could still be members of the EEA. We could have a bilateral agreement like Switzerland. Those are all up for negotiations. So, and if you've been married for 5 years, I'm not a French lawyer, but my colleagues just told me he could apply for French citizenship. So, if you've been married for 5 years or more. So.
Can you in theory have dual nationality? Excuse me, madam.
Yeah, France and the UK allow dual nationality, so you can be French and British.
I've been in the UK for 2 years, but haven't lost time, and I'm in the minority. I married an English wife. So I've read on the Home Office website that I can apply for British citizenship after only 3 years. Is that true? And will I still need this permanent certificate?
So if you are married to a British citizen, you only need to show 3 years residence at the time you apply for British citizenship, but you have to have acquired permanent residence, and it will still take you 5 years to acquire permanent residence. So effectively, it's because it used to be the case that spouses of British nationals got permanent residence after 2 years. It's now 5 years, so it's a bit irrelevant. But in the past, it used to help those people get British citizenship more quickly.
I'm still confused about this indefinite leave to remain to leave before prior period. I've been here since 1997, and you said from a certain date you acquired indefinite leave, something stamped in your passport.
In between the 2nd of October 2000 and 30th of April 2006, you were required, if you wanted to, you can get a document that showed that you had indefinite leave to remain. So it was a status before permanent residency. On the 30th of April 2006, the Citizens Directive came into force. And that means that you don't have to do anything. You have permanent residency in itself, okay? And when you apply for it, it's just a document that confirms that you have that. Before that date, you could make an application and you were granted a little stamp on a freestanding document that said no time limit or indefinite leave to remain. So that means that you are considered to be settled under the Immigration Act. You have to remember there's a distinction between European law and domestic British law. Whilst we are members of the European Union, European law is superior to British law. So all your rights as European Union citizens are still in effect, and you still have all the rights of recourse if the British government were to do anything to that. If you have indefinite leave to remain, you are applying for a status that's under domestic UK law, okay? So if you have indefinite leave to remain, then you still have those rights under European law, but you also have those rights under domestic law. So if, for example, in the worst possible scenario, the British government said, we are not going to recognise permanent residence, we are actually going to say that you have to apply for 5 years under the immigration rules, those people that have indefinite leave to remain will still have indefinite leave to remain because it's under domestic British law.
To get the British citizenship for children under 18, my son is 10, born in March 2006. Which forms shall we fill in? MN1 or Form T? I'm very confused between those two.
Yeah, so if you're, first of all, if you didn't have a document confirming permanent residence when he was born, he's obviously not been born British, so you're correct in saying that you need to register. As a general rule, they typically prefer you to use Form T if you can show that they've been here for 10 years and not been absent for more than 90 days in each of the 10 years, because it's an entitlement to British citizenship, which is stronger. So I think as a general rule, they would say Form T, but you could apply on the basis of Section 1(3) of the British Nationality Act, because they were born here and you've subsequently acquired permanent residence.
Born in March, because I know from 1st of July there's a difference as well. March 2000.
July is something different. July is to do with children who were born to unmarried parents. So the relevant date is the 30th of April 2006 for the purposes of EU law. The July date is something slightly different for children and British citizenship.
I was just wondering, having been a taxpayer for 25 years in this country and continuously registered with the French consulate, does it confer any additional rights and also as a homeowner?
I mean, under domestic immigration law, as you've been here for over 20 years, you have a right to a private life under the European Convention. So, irrespective of what the politicians negotiate, you have certain rights against being removed from this country. So people who have been here for 20 years have those rights. If you've been here for 10 years or more, you can apply for indefinite leave to remain if you wish to.
I've been here for 11 years, mostly working, but at the moment I started a PhD last October, and I've suddenly realised today that I now need a comprehensive sickness insurance. If I get that now and then do the paperwork, does that invalidate my claim because I haven't had it since October?
Well, I think that if you were working for 5 years prior to now, then you would have acquired permanent residence anyways, in which case you don't need comprehensive sickness insurance because you're a qualified person by virtue of the fact that you have permanent residence.
Does PGC count studying or is training?
It probably counts as studying.
Okay.
If not, then the periods of time that you've been a student without private health insurance, you're not going to be able to count towards permanent residence. It may be you could look at whether or not you could find a 10-year period of lawful residence for the purposes of the 10-year rule, something you'd have to look in a bit more detail. But otherwise, unfortunately, any periods of time as a self-sufficient person or as a student without comprehensive sickness insurance is likely to be refused. Now, I just say there is an argument that people should be able to say that access to the NHS where there are bilateral agreements should count. The UK does not take that position, and if you were to go down that sort of route, you'd be looking at a lot of court time, appeals, and so on. So if possible, whenever you are here as a self-sufficient person or a student, it's really important that you have private health insurance, which is comprehensive.
Basically, I've been here for 15 years. I never filled in any paperwork whatsoever, either in France or in the UK, other than my national insurance. And about a year ago, I had a career change, so I just came off the workforce and never registered anywhere for unemployment. I just wonder whether that waived my right as a EU citizen.
No, I mean, if you were here for 14 years at that point, and you've acquired permanent residence, again, you don't need to continue to exercise treaty rights once you've acquired permanent residence. It doesn't matter, you get them. As William says, they're in the air. The right's there. You just need to get confirmation of it.
I've been here for 25 years, and obviously I didn't anticipate Brexit, and I've never applied for the citizenship. Do I then need to go and apply for the permanent residency? Did I understand well? I need to apply for the permanent residency first, before applying for the citizenship. And second questions, I mean, with regards to all the laws around the pensions, etc., will things change?
So, in anticipation for what was likely to be a rush of applications, they did change the rules in November last year, so you do now need to get confirmation of permanent residence before you can naturalise as a British citizen. If your question on pensions relates to your entitlement to pensions, that's an area of law that we personally wouldn't be able to advise on. You'd need to speak to benefits lawyers who would be able to advise in more detail on that.
How can we do things to put pressure on the government to get involved to avoid this nonsense of Brexit? That's my question.
Well, if I take my lawyer hat off, obviously, those of you who want to get involved in politics, find out who your local MP is, find out if they were a Brexiteer, deluge them with emails, ask them what's going to happen to you as European citizens, speak to them, get involved in local campaigns, etc. But also, from an English standpoint, we need to actually try and persuade some other politicians in Europe to not take such a strong line against the UK, because there are other Eurosceptic countries, and from an English perspective, to see Juncker saying, get out within 2 years, where there is the possibility that we may not press the Article 50 button, I think certain European politicians should calm down and actually say that there is a prospect that we don't press the Article 50 button, and to actually negotiate rather than punishing the UK. Because like you say, 48% of people did not vote for Brexit, and we want to try and rescue that, and it doesn't help having European politicians saying get out the door.
Which one is actually part of the domestic law? Is it the indefinite leave to remain?
Yeah.
So if I were to actually to apply for the permanent residence, if I don't wish to have the British citizenship, when the UK is out of the European Union, do I need to do something else?
That will be subject to, obviously, negotiations once we come to the end of the Article 50 negotiations, and the British government will have to take a decision as to what effect permanent residency under EU law will have under domestic UK law. So there will be transitional provisions, and we would hope that PR would in effect become indefinite leave to remain.
So if I wanted to remain
but we
here...
can't guarantee that. We can't guarantee that.
If I wanted to remain here, it would be better for me to have indefinite leave to remain.
Correct.
I've been here for about 15 years, 16 years. My kids are born here. I took them, out EU. I took them to Africa for 1 year, and I bring them back. So they've been here in school for about 5 years already now. So to do the registration, what do I need to do? I mean, is it the form MN1, or what I have to do the registration for them? They are born here.
If your children were born here and you've subsequently obtained permanent residence, then you can apply for them to be registered, and it would be on form MN1.
Given that most people seem to be here for at least 10 or 15 years, I wonder politically whether it wouldn't make sense that we keep our European passports rather than rushing to get the English passport in order to stay a force in this country.
Just to confirm, as we've already said, by obtaining British citizenship, which we're not saying you have to do, we're just saying it's the only option which we can say categorically you'll definitely, no matter what crazy negotiations could happen, be secure. You're not giving up your French citizenship. You're still French nationals. Both countries recognise dual nationality. It's just an option for people who want to feel more secure and want to feel that they don't need to worry about any potential craziness that could happen in any future negotiations.
I've been here 20 years. My wife is British. My daughter is British. I've never bothered registering her. So I just wanted to know, if I don't bother doing anything, just, assuming my daughter is 4, in 2 years' time, if I'm only a European citizen, can I be kicked out of the country, or does my daughter have a right to grow up with her father?
As you're married to a British citizen, you can apply to remain as the spouse of a British citizen, but you have permanent residency anyway. If you did nothing, and the British government said that those who have acquired permanent residence, even those that don't apply for a document certifying it, can remain in the UK, you will have logistical challenges with employers showing that you have permanent residency in the UK. So although we can't categorically say you won't be kicked out in your situation, it is towards the 0.00. Nothing's going to happen to you, okay?